Hey there, friends. Jay Revell here. I am the guest host this week of the Biz and Tech podcast, brought to you by my friends at Aegis Business Technologies. And my guest, a little bit of a role reversal perhaps, is my dear friend Blake H. Dowling, CEO of Aegis Business Technologies. Blake, how are you, my friend?
It's great to be on the show today, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Well, you and I have had a fun history getting to know each other more and more the last 6 or 7 months, working on a very fun project. We're going to talk about that today, undoubtedly, and at length. But I wanted to maybe start off with just how are things going in your world? We're here in almost August now of 2021. Time has flown by and dramatically, it seems. But what's going on in the Aegis world today? What's on your plate? What's happening in your world?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? Let's see. SEC,
Other than getting ready for the college football season.
Yeah, SEC football is top of mind, obviously, with that countdown. Just got the Airbnb for Game 1,
Nice.
And, of course, for the Alabama weekend.
Oh.
There is no accommodations available within 100 miles of Gainesville for the Alabama weekend. When number 1 comes to town, things happen. But on the work front, at 1310 Thomasville Road, things are brisk. Here we are 6 months into the year, like you said, and I'm still thinking back to 2020 with this project, obviously, but we're halfway through the year, and cybersecurity is top of mind. Our team is growing. We're just excited to be in a position where, as we learned last year, we're an essential business, so that's a lot of fun. When we thought things were going to be a little tighter in the state of Florida, the Florida Chamber rolled out some paperwork here. You need to have this paperwork in case you get pulled over, especially people like that live in Bluntstown that are on my team.
Yeah.
And, that kind of stuff didn't happen, but I wrote those letters. So we've come a long way since those days. And, the March 2020 podcast, I was in this room with Kristen Dozier, sitting in the studio talking about what's going to happen. And who would have known what we were about to embark on as a company, as a community, as friends. And then right there at the end, man, you and I sitting at Red Eye Coffee here in Midtown. And you came up with a great idea to put down in writing some of my experiences during 2020. And for anyone watching, here's a little teaser before we dive into the discussion. Professionally Distanced was born 6 months ago. And today is a reality thanks to a lot of people. But we'll get to that in a minute.
I've done a lot of crazy brainstorming in local coffee shops with clients and friends over the years. And I'm proud to say that a lot of those ideas turned out pretty good. This one is one I'm very proud of. You and I got together for a cup of coffee. We're just sort of catching up. I was at that time maybe a few months into my new venture, Revell Media. Look that up, folks.
Quality organization, quality.
At least one happy client in the world we know of today. So you and I got to having a conversation. I always like to talk with folks about telling their story, finding unique ways to weave their story into in and out of everything that they do. And we got to talking about how, your wonderful columns that you write for the Tallahassee Democrat, for FloridaPolitics.com.
One happy reader.
Yeah,
right.
Thank you.
Thank you for those
Mutual
kind
Admiration Society here. So, you had these great columns, and in particular, we were reflecting at the time at, sort of the end of 2020, what that year was like, and the columns that you're writing on a weekly basis just happen to also be this perfect documentation of what was going on from the point of view of a Florida small business owner. And that's really where this birth of the book idea came from. So what was it like from your perspective writing those columns week to week during the pandemic, and how does it feel now reflecting back on them a little bit?
Well, a micro view of it reminds me of a project that the Tallahassee Democrat team gave me 2 years ago at the Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce conference. So they said, go ahead and put like a rolling diary together with like 4 or 5 entries a day on what it's like.
Yeah, I remember that. That's right.
And it was a lot of fun to put that project together. And if you take that project and then scope it out over an entire year, and hey, it's January, everybody's fired up, we're having a great year, it's 2020, everybody. And then by February, thinking something's going on in the world. And by March and April, the tone of those columns obviously changed. And to be able to document it and do a rolling diary of the year, And to put it to that coffee conversation, to go from talking about family, football, and the usual to an actionable task. Let's create a book.
Yeah.
Let's put these columns and make it fresh, because no one wants to read a compilation. But this is a fresh compilation. This is an introduction to each chapter, how I'm feeling at that time, whether Jeannie and I haven't left the house in a week or whether we're heading out to football games. When UF said we're going, I said I'm going.
Yeah.
No brainer. And to have that stadium, I'm getting off topic a little bit, but to have that stadium to myself with 2,000 people, that'll never happen again. I walked up to kickoff 2 different games and just strolled right in. What's up?
Yeah.
Go Gators. I mean, that experience will never happen again. But to be able to capture that, and within that 1 hour, we came up with the idea. We put it in ink, reached out to a lot of people in the community, throw some shout outs out there, Roland Publishing, Target Print and Mail, yourself. Great team assembled to roll this out. And it's done, man. I'm really proud of what we accomplished together. And I think anyone that lived through the pandemic and ran a business especially will be able to draw some commonality. I had that same thought. Yeah. Do we keep the business open? Do we send everyone home? Do we keep some people here? Those decision points, maybe some personal, am I doing the right thing kind of vibe. But we just kept things going full speed at Aegis. 5 of us stayed at headquarters throughout the pandemic to run the business, and everybody else went home. And switching to that model, and then helping our clients for 2 months solid switch to that model. And you think, you run your own business. You think that you could work wherever you want. You think everyone has that capability. Some people have just gone to the office for the past 10, 15 years and remoting in. They clock out at 5.
Right.
I don't know what clocking out at 5 means, but
me either.
But you work where you are and you do what the day demands.
Yeah.
And to be able to help those organizations switch, it was a humble moment. I felt a lot of pride being there for our clients last year. And like you said, it's hard to believe we're 6 months into this year, but here we are, man.
Yeah. Well, we keep saying, I feel like you and I in our conversations keep saying we're halfway through this year. We're already we're creeping up on 3/4 through this year, but it's just flying so fast. It's almost like time in 2020. It felt like it really slowed down for a minute, and then it boom just accelerated. And I've used the expression a lot that the pandemic was this sort of societal accelerant. All these underlying trends, which you document so well in your weekly columns, are just all got thrust to the forefront, and a lot of people just weren't ready for it. So I think about, again, your business. You're helping people manage their technology. You must have been getting calls off the charts. Hey, we've got to get ready for this whole new world that's been dumped on our heads here, like an afternoon storm in Tallahassee.
Right.
What was that like? And again, you're also trying to not only manage this influx of client calls, but your team's now out remote yourself. So pretty strange dynamic.
Well, most situations, everything was business as usual. But what we did see a little bit of last year was full-on panic.
Yeah.
We had a sign on the door that closed the business. We were accepting packages and deliveries, and appointments were scheduled for drop-offs and pickups and that sort of thing, at the height of things, May, June. But we had situations where people were literally ignoring that closed sign and beating on the door and saying, I need this laptop to work. I'm like, where did you find this laptop? This is my daughter's. It hasn't been used in years. Help me. No joke. I mean, that is an impression of someone that will remain safely anonymous.
Right.
A lobbyist here in town. If they're watching, I remember you. But we had a few instances like that. But for the most part, this community is so gracious and so kind. And when I said to a lot of people, we're a couple days behind, you are in line, and I will get you to the top of the list as soon as possible. Most people said, I understand.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And again, I think about with the book, you'll probably have a lot of business owners who are picking it up and reading it and remembering their own mindsets during that time and thinking hopefully they can laugh at it a little bit now. You've got a lot of you do a brilliant job of weaving humor in your columns week to week, and it feels like for those who, if you're an active reader, which I count myself among, the folks who are in that category, you've got some inside jokes almost that run through the book. You talk about your JPC index, your jokes per column index.
That's fresh for this book.
That's fresh for the book, folks.
That's a teaser right there.
Yeah. How would you describe, your writing style and just, your personality and how it comes through in the book a little bit?
Well, it's certainly a balancing act because the pieces that I put together for FloridaPolitics.com, are read around the state, and I get some interesting feedback from, former elected officials, former judges, a lot of people around the state, because I put my email address on every column.
Yeah.
I own it. Say, reach out to me with feedback. And usually the feedback's great. And sometimes it's, Blake's a communist. Blake's this, Blake's that.
Not a communist.
Definitely not a communist. But, I get some interesting feedback. And I usually share those comments on Instagram just to bring some comedy to the table. But it's all a balancing act. Mm-hmm. I want to bring some humor to the table, and I want to bring some actionable items to business leaders and organizations, especially on cybersecurity. I'm always weaving cybersecurity into the story, but with those 2020 columns, I veered off the path a lot. I'm going to talk about my family. I'm going to talk about my wife, Jeannie, and the cats she adopted. I'm going to talk about the band Sister Hazel from Gainesville and the challenges they went through during the pandemic. You want to talk about people banging on the door without an appointment. How about no work at all?
Yeah.
Music industry shot. We can talk about more about that industry in a minute. But, when I write for the Tallahassee Democrat, on the other side, I try to do something local driven, maybe feature somebody locally and not just talk about myself. Because, you have to balance that, how to not sound like a narcissist, where I have a message and a brand I want to put forward, but I also want to make sure to include a message, someone local that I respect, something I believe in, whether that's a charitable organization or an individual. And as we saw with putting these columns in a book, I got to take out the YouTube clips and the links that I put in the Florida Politics columns, because that's a big part of that. The last one I wrote had the Outsiders trailer in there, Pony Boy and Soda Pop, and if you didn't watch that trailer, you didn't really get into the vibe of that column. But, it's all a balancing act, serious with comedy, business message with branding, and hopefully come up with something that people dig.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are going to dig the book. You mentioned Sister Hazel, music industry, maybe a good segue to talk a little bit about your origin story. When I work with clients, I like to start with sort of the comic book issue number 1, right? Tell me your origin story, how you got to be the person you are today, because I think that usually is the foundation for what it is that you're doing. And your story, I think, is particularly interesting. If you just see Aegis Biz Tech on the sign when you're driving down Thomasville Road, you probably don't know that there's a gold record hanging on the wall in there, so to speak. So let's talk a little bit about that. So where does page 1 of the Blake Dowling story begin in your mind?
All right, so for the next 2 hours, we'll talk about 1984. I was sitting on my aunt's living room floor, and the Motley Crue video for Looks That Kill came on, and I was floored by the band, by the music, by the video. This is MTV era. And you fast forward to college, and I'm the social chairman for the ATO fraternity at the University of Florida, and I'm following in my predecessor's footsteps, hiring talent. So I went out and I saw every band in town. That's how committed I was to my craft. Yeah. I had to go check out and research, official research, ladies and gentlemen, every band in town. And one of those bands, I knew the guitar player Ryan Newell from his previous band, the Black Creek Band, and he introduced me to Ken and Andrew, and they were rolling in Gainesville, selling 500 tickets, 600 tickets at various establishments, and I hired them to play an ATO event. And you'll see that story in the book, actually page 1, from Ken Block, their lead singer. He and I still keep up. But that was an introduction to, what are the possibilities here, man? Mm-hmm. I take that Motley Crue video and that spark, who's behind this? It's not these 4 lunatics. Yeah. There's got to be more to it than that. Vince and Nikki and Mick and Tommy, they probably couldn't put Legos together without a lot of help. But the road crews and the booking agents and the radio people. So I saw that on the front lines of the college scene, and I took that with that band because Sister Hazel got signed to Universal Records not too long after that. They moved up to Atlanta with their management, and their management team said, "You want to join us?" And I said, long story short, I said, "Yes, I want to join you." We had an office, 83 Walton Street, downtown Atlanta. We shared office space with the Capricorn Records building, which is the Allman Brothers label.
Yeah.
311 Cake, Widespread Panic in the 90s, if you followed that scene. They had their old school Marshall Tucker Band, Allman Brothers, catalog artists, as well as these new bands. I felt like I was on the epicenter of Ground Zero. I might as well have been walking the streets of Sunset Boulevard and, Hollywood. I had my own little motley crew going up stage in Atlanta with those guys in the band and our team that the band called Where's the Party Management, which is also in a chapter in the book. But, you take that experience and you know what? I felt like I checked a lot of boxes. Gold record for the 10 Things I Hate About You soundtrack is still on my wall, yes, with the cassette, which dates me as a 40-something-year-old. And then I walked into a career in IT, and that I got to check the box for my dream job. I got to accomplish a lot of goals, and then I got to set off on a path to become CEO of Aegis, which started also in Atlanta. And here I am 15 years later with Aegis, and we're doing some good things at 1310 Thomasville Road.
You told me a little bit about how you got kind of reeled into Aegis. What was that story like?
That's a good story. So I'm working in IT in Atlanta. I checked out of the music business, and just an FYI, you might not be the most marketable person as a former music industry executive because I'm wearing shorts and a T-shirt most days and moving into a Fortune 1000 company, check in, check out. So I tried to take some of the casual elements of the music business, combine with corporate America, and blend that together at Aegis. So I met Aegis as a company through my friend Davison Dunlap. Davison heard I was moving back to Tallahassee. He said, let's go to a UF game. This is 16 years ago, so before I had season tickets. He introduced me to local tech guru Steve Evans, who's a mentor to many. And Steve, thank you. Appreciate the introduction to Aegis. Davison to Steve, Steve to the founders of Aegis, and they gave me a shot. Pam Butler and I had a phone call, and she said, you can be my salesperson. What do you want to be called? I'm like, business development consultant. And that led down a trail of, account executive, sales and marketing director, chief business development officer. There's a long title that's not necessary at all. And then 5 years ago, I was blessed enough to assume the top spot as CEO of Aegis, and we've been rocking and rolling, no pun intended, ever since.
I love it. We're talking about your office, gold record hanging on the wall. I always think that, when I walk into a client's office, I love paying attention to the menagerie in there, right? Seeing what's on the wall, what kind of stories they try to portray, because
we have to in Tallahassee.
Right, absolutely.
You don't want to, jump into the football talk prematurely. No. You see an Auburn poster in the corner, like, don't talk football with these people.
So, I come by your office and you're showing me the gold record, but there's another item on there that really grabs your attention. You've got this photograph or I guess front page of the Tallahassee Democrat where you're kind of doing the tricky dick, Richard Nixon sign a little bit. And I said, well, what's this about? And of course you've got a story to tell. So, and it's a great segue into how you became a writer. So I'd love to hear that from your perspective again.
And you know what's cool about that? A client sent me a PDF copy of the front page of the Democrat that morning and said, I took some time to, format this. I thought you would want to hang on to this for life. And she was right. I sent that PDF to a framing company and slapped it on a piece of wood, and I've had it in my office ever since. That was 2009. So Aegis is a top 3 finalist for the Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce Tech Company of the Year Award. And we're sitting around our table and having our quiet event and looking around the room, and there's a couple other quality companies, in the top 3, and I had only been with the company 3 years at that point. So, we weren't reeling in the Florida Trend Best Places to Work awards or anything like that. This was like the big local award at that time.
I remember.
And so we're all nervous, like, we're going to win. This would be huge for the company. And they announce us, and everybody looks at me when they say Aegis and said, go. And I'm like, all right. And for whatever reason, maybe I drank 2 pots of coffee that day, but I burst into a sprint. Everybody else is walking up there. And I run up there, and they're all like, oh, my goodness, what's going on? And I grabbed the plaque out of the lady's hand, and I was like, woohoo, and put up the peace signs. And so that was a fun moment, a little obnoxious, I admit. But it led to a phone call from the former editor of the Democrat, Dave Hodges, literally an hour later. Cell phone, didn't know his cell phone, but I always answer unknown calls. And for the record, you should always answer unknown calls. It could be an emergency or an opportunity.
Or a spam call.
But it says telemarketer now. Phones are smart now.
Yeah.
So I pick up the phone. He's like, Dave Hodges here, editor of the Tallahassee Democrat. I'm putting your picture on the front page. Just wanted to give you a heads up. It'll be in tomorrow's edition. And I'm like, cool. I'm like, what'd you get? He's like, oh, I got a good one. And it's the full on, peace signs in the air. And my phone rang off the hook for days about that. Was it a North Florida recognition only? Was I on the cover of Time magazine? No, but it was a proud moment for me and for the company that I represent and for the clients that we get to serve. I was all smiles for days and still am when I see it. And now that we're making that part of the book, freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And little did I know, part B answered your question. Dave said, "Hey, you ever write anything, man?" I'm like, "Sure."
He could just sense the star, in you.
My first columns were so bad, Jay. I mean, bad. I've reread some of them. Not good. But I gave it a shot. I used to write some press releases in the music business, so I had a foundation, small. Yeah. But, I like to think I've sharpened the blade, honed the craft a little bit. And what I'm putting out these days, whether you get my sense of humor or not, and am I Mark Twain? No, but I'm writing some good stuff versus 10 years ago. So thanks for that.
You're definitely the Mark Twain of the north end of Midtown, right? Yeah.
I'm the Mark
Just put
Twain.
that on your sign soon.
The Mark Twain of Midtown Tallahassee. Well said.
Yeah. It's funny, repetition, working through stuff like that, like writing a weekly column. It does sharpen your tools. You're going to get better as you go, and you're going to find things that work and things that don't based on the feedback that you're getting. But
that doesn't work with singing, by the way.
Yeah, I found that too. But what are you going to do?
Not sing.
Not sing. I got a face for radio, but you got the camera rolling over here today, so you're going to get the full package. But I think about people who are in business for themselves. Or have something to do with how they market an organization. And I see things so often where people will start what is a new big announcement, a new thing we're going to be doing, and 6 weeks later it's done. It's off to the wayside. But so I commend you because to me you do as good a job, if not better, than just about anybody I know of staying on people's minds by continuing to tell stories and communicate. I think it's a wonderful marketing strategy. It makes for a lot of friendships, a lot of connections, and a very big network. And, it's not easy to sit down every week and stare at the blank screen and write another column. So, I know it's not easy to do, but you've got a bit of a process that helps you do it. You talk about, sort of sitting out on the back porch and just, staring at the screen and seeing what comes out. What's that process like for you when you do it?
It's an email yourself process. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you find yourself doing that, but whenever I need to remember something and I don't feel like putting it on the calendar, putting it on a to-do list, I email myself. Mm-hmm. Hey, did you read that about so-and-so, Colonial Pipeline? Like, start there with new column. Hey, talk to Jay about this idea. So this past week, I started emailing myself about authors in Florida. Mm-hmm. I'm like, let's talk about self-publishing. Let's reach out to the Florida Writers Association, see if they've got some feedback. She sent me 3 authors because you and I were talking about some self-published folks in the state, and I just parlayed that into a nice little piece, which professionally distanced happens to be mentioned in the end of that column. And weave in Sally Bradshaw and Midtown Reader, the coolest bookstore in North Florida. She's been a guest on the podcast, and what they've accomplished over there is so cool, especially during the pandemic. Did you know they were doing like out-of-state and out-of-country orders during the pandemic? Wow. So kudos to them. But that process, email yourself and start an outline on a Sunday night. Maybe spend 30 minutes working on it, and then email that to myself. Do a lot of emailing to myself. Yep. And, maybe Monday morning, get in at 7 and start fine-tuning it a little bit. Have at least a couple actionable paragraphs. And at that point, I say, delete or continue. Yeah. Because I've hit a couple of roadblocks. This doesn't make any sense, even to me. Oh yeah. This is just garbage. No meme is going to make this funny or readable. So that's where this article this week is going, and I'm going to launch it out today. And speaking of Sally, let's talk about the let's talk about August 19th.
Yeah. You've got an exciting event coming up with Midtown Reader, a launch event for the book coming up on August 19th, 7 p.m. sharp over at the Midtown Reader. Are you excited for that?
I am. Sally was gracious enough to offer to put the book for sale at Midtown Reader. So starting in about 10 days, she'll have it on the shelves. And I read from Jeff Vandermeer, a local writer whose film Annihilation book based on film based on book. He said he didn't feel like a writer until he saw his book in a store.
Yeah.
And that's an old school approach, but I'm stoked to walk in there and see it on the shelf. And as I said in this new column, am I hoping that the book is at the Smithsonian in 100 years for society to ponder? That's not really the goal here. The goal is here to resonate with business leaders, especially here in North Florida, with those that are in marketing, with those that have ever written anything, or anybody that loves a story or wants to tell a story.
That's it.
That's the goal here. And yeah, we'll be at Midtown Reader August 19th, 7 p.m., like you said, right here in Midtown.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from my own personal experience, when I published my book last year, the first person who walked up and asked me to sign it, I was like completely just embarrassed by it. I'm like, well, this is just crazy. But it's a cool feeling. It is a neat thing. And I think we fortunately live in a community where people really, we give a lot of credit to those who are willing to go down this path and share their thoughts on things and turn them into a book. This is a reading town. So
yeah, and it's a cool little club, yourself included. I've read Gary Jordan's book, J.R. Harding's book. It's powerful. Mine is not on that level of his journey. But, it's a small little club of Tallahassee writers, and I'm excited to join the club and get professionally distanced out there, not just at Midtown Reader, but we're going to have it on Amazon starting next week, so that'll be awesome.
Yeah, folks from all around the world that want to read your words.
I'm huge in Belgium, as they say in the music business. I reckon it's huge in Belgium. Huge.
I love that. And, there's another opportunity that folks are going to get to pick up a copy of the book. Those who are attending this year's Chamber of Commerce Annual Community Conference. I've been saying that for a long time. It's still a lot of words to get out of your mouth.
You did a great job with it.
Thank you. Those who have gone to the conference before know there's no greater anticipation than getting back to your room and seeing what's in your swag bag. And in everyone's swag bag this year at the Chamber Conference, you're going to get a lovely copy of Professionally Distanced to pass the time while you're listening to the waves roll in on Amelia Island at the Ritz-Carlton. So
it's pretty cool. And I'm basically in an arms race with myself because for 15 years, we've been a sponsor of the Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce Annual Community Conference. And each year I want to outdo the year before.
That's right.
And 2 years ago, we had the co-branded Big Brothers Big Sisters Aegis little power pack, and I'm like, what can we do better than that? And when we started talking that day at the coffee shop, I'm like, oh no, I know what we have. I know what we must do. We must go down the path of giving the first 500 of these books away. And I think it's going to be something we've never done. And next year, the arms race is over. I'm going back to a pen. We're going back to the beginning, a pen in the sack.
Well, next year, what we do is we put the pen that says it's time for you to write your own story, right?
Oh,
hey, that's what we do here at Revell Media. Big ideas and small packages. But
awesome.
I'm excited for you, man. It's so cool to again see the book and have it in hand. It's been a few months now since we started, and our over-caffeinated big idea session has turned into something pretty cool and tangible that folks can pick up and read and not only learn about you and your business, but probably learn some things about their own. And I think that's really cool.
Well, ultimately, it's my in writing thank you to my staff for being there for our clients during the pandemic. It's a thank you to this great community that we live in. We take it for granted. And people say, oh, Tallahassee's great. Man, it is. Tallahassee's a great place to live and work. It's a thank you to our clients. It's a thank you to everyone. And it's mainly thank you to, to you for helping make this happen. And what a great place to get started with the Chamber and Midtown Reader. And you want to talk about repetition. Look for a lot of social media posts in the next 30 days as we roll this out. But thank you for the opportunity to talk about Professionally Distanced today. This is a dream, man.
Yeah.
I've wanted to write a book probably since college. I don't know. But you put the idea in an actionable form, and I'll be forever grateful for that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it was a real pleasure from my perspective to work on the project with you. You did an outstanding job of tying a really crazy year all together into something that people can certainly relate to and enjoy reading. And I can't wait for people to get a hold of it here in the weeks to come. So, folks, that's Professionally Distanced. All access stories from a Florida business during the 2020 pandemic by my friend Blake H. Dowling, CEO of Aegis Business Technologies. And you've been listening to the Biz Tech podcast. Thanks for listening as always, folks. We'll look forward to maybe I get to come back on again someday.
We'll have you on next year.
I love it. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, man.